"Why are you still here?" she yelled. The single dad's calm reply froze the room. They snickered the moment he walked through the door. Diana Harrington leaned toward her husband Greg, her champagne flute angled like a pointer at the man signing in at the registration table, and said, just loud enough for the right people to hear, "Oh, Greg, they've seated a scholarship family with the donors again." Greg smirked, didn't bother lowering his voice. "I'll get Paul to handle it." The Westbrook Academy annual gala had transformed the school's new performing arts center into the kind of room that existed to remind people of their place. Crystal chandeliers sourced from an estate in Connecticut, table linens ironed to geometrical precision, floral arrangements that cost more per centerpiece than most families spent on a week of groceries. The donor list at Westbrook was the social currency of Lakeview, and tonight that currency was on full display. Pearls, tailored suits, understated watches that announced themselves only to people who knew what to look for. Marcus Hayes stood at the registration table in a navy suit he had pressed himself that morning. Clean, decent, 3 years old. His shoes were polished. Sophie had done most of the work, narrating an elaborate imaginary tutorial about proper shoe care for dads while he sat on the kitchen floor, but worn at the toe in the way shoes get when they've done real work. His hands, calloused from the woodshop behind their house, held the registration card a beat too carefully, the way people do when they know they're being watched. Diana Harrington, president of the Westbrook Parent Excellence Committee for 6 consecutive years, stood 40 feet away with her phone out, typing. She didn't know that the man at the registration table had personally funded the room they were standing in. She didn't know that the new science wing on the east side of campus bore a dedication plate reading, "In memory of Rachel Hayes," because he'd requested the smallest possible font and the least visible location on the building. She didn't know that the scholarship program bringing 12 families to tonight's dinner existed because of a call Marcus had made to the development office on an otherwise ordinary Thursday morning 8 months ago. By the time the night was over, every person in that room would know all of it. The registration coordinator, a young woman named Claire who had clearly reviewed the donor manifest, looked up from her clipboard at Marcus, went briefly still, and said, "Mr. Hayes, of course. Your table is front section, table 4. A pause. "We weren't sure you'd be attending in person, sir. We're so glad you're here." Marcus looked at her with an expression that carried a very specific request. "Just Marcus," he said. "And please, nothing about the other thing." She nodded immediately. 2 feet away, the parent waiting to sign in next had heard just enough to be curious, not enough to understand. She spent the first 40 minutes of the evening occasionally glancing toward table 4. What no one in that room knew yet was that the other thing was about to become the only thing anyone at Westbrook Academy would discuss for the next several years. 5 hours earlier, Marcus Hayes had woken up to the smell of burnt toast. Sophie had climbed the kitchen counter while he was in the shower, located the bread bag, and made her own executive decision about breakfast timing. By the time Marcus appeared in the doorway, she was fanning smoke from the toaster with a dish towel, wearing an expression that dared him to make it a thing. "I was making you breakfast," she said. "I can see that. It was almost eggs, but we were out of eggs. So you pivoted to toast." "I pivoted," she confirmed. The toast was black through. They ate cereal instead at the kitchen table, while the toast sat on the counter as a monument to ambition. Sophie decorated his tie with a sunflower sticker she informed him was required, not optional. He wore it all day. He would have worn it to the gala if she'd asked. This was what mattered. He had spent considerable time, in the last 2 years, clarifying what mattered. The kind of clarification that only happens when someone you love is sick, then gone. And then you are standing in your own house at 7 a.m. deciding what kind of life you're going to build from the remaining material. Rachel had been diagnosed 18 months before she died. Glioblastoma, the kind that doesn't negotiate. Marcus had sold his stake in Atlas Systems in October of that year. He'd built the company over 8 years, had been preparing it for an IPO when the diagnosis changed all the math. He left. He was in every room, every appointment, every conversation with every doctor, for every month that remained. He didn't miss any of it. He'd stopped being a CEO and become a husband again, and then a widower, and then the person in charge of explaining things to Sophie that no parent should ever have to explain. The money from the sale went 3 places. The mortgage paid off, a foundation established in Rachel's name, and a personal account for Sophie's future. None of it went toward a bigger house or a fancier car or any of the markers of what he'd been before. He'd built a wood shop in the garage. He took commissions for custom furniture, bookshelves, dining tables, headboards built to last, because the work required his hands and his attention simultaneously, and left very little room in his head for anything else. He'd found Westbrook at a school fair in October. Sophie had wandered into the art demonstration booth, sat down across from a teacher named Julia Torres, and not moved for 2 hours. Marcus had watched from the edge of the tent, styrofoam cup of cold coffee in hand, unable to make himself interrupt. It was the first time since the funeral that he'd seen Sophie laugh without looking surprised by it. He enrolled her the following week. 8 months after that, he called the school's development director and arranged the rest, anonymously, at his own insistence. Because he didn't want a dinner in his honor. He wanted Sophie's school to be good. He wanted the families who needed help to have it. That was the whole thing. He'd almost not gone to the gala tonight. Didn't love events like this. But the development office had asked specifically, something about a milestone acknowledgement for the scholarship fund, and it had felt wrong to refuse. He'd packed Sophie off to her grandmother's, pressed the suit, polished the shoes, found the painted rock on the passenger seat when he got in the truck. Sophie's note, "Good luck, Daddy. The rock is for bravery. Love, your best kid." He put it in his jacket pocket. Drove to the school. Walked through the door just in time for Diana Harrington to decide who he was. The dinner had been going 40 minutes when Diana made her first move. Marcus was standing near the bar, waiting while the bartender cleared a backlog, when she appeared at his left elbow with the posture of someone who'd spent decades having their arrivals registered. "I don't believe we've been introduced," she said. The smile was technically present. "Diana Harrington. I chair the Parent Excellence Committee. I help oversee events like these." Marcus Hayes, Sophie's dad. "Sophie," she let the name settle. "3rd grade? The Torres class?" "That's right. How lovely." A pause calibrated precisely. "I want to make sure I have this right. Are you attending as a parent guest this evening, or as a donor?" Marcus said. Even, not cold, not warm, just clear. Something shifted in her expression. Barely. She hadn't expected the word. "I see. The suggested table contribution for tonight is $2,000, I know." I read the invitation. Per family, though for single parents we certainly make allowances, Diana, Julia Torres appeared, as if from nowhere, holding 2 glasses of sparkling water. She handed one to Marcus without being asked, and smiled at Diana with the specific warmth of someone who has learned exactly when to deploy it. "I'm so glad you got to meet Sophie's dad. Marcus built the new reading loft in my classroom 2 Saturdays ago. Wouldn't take a cent." Diana's gaze moved to Marcus's hands. To the suit. She filed something, assembled a conclusion, and arranged her face back into its working expression. "How generous," she said. The word did what words sometimes do. It meant its opposite. Marcus didn't correct her. She excused herself. He watched her cross to Greg and two men from the development board. The conversation involved a fair amount of nodding and one glance in Marcus's direction that Greg tried to make casual and didn't quite manage. Julia moved to stand beside him. She wasn't watching Diana. She was watching the room. She does this every year, Julia said quietly. Families, she's decided, don't fit. She ran off a very good dad from the Spring Literacy Committee because she decided she didn't like his neighborhood. You're not going to say anything? Not yet. She looked at him sideways. You're very calm for someone being actively processed. I'm used to meetings, he said. She looked like she was about to ask what he meant. Then his phone buzzed. He checked it. His expression changed. Not dramatically, but enough. Excuse me for a moment. He moved toward the side hallway. Julia watched him through the glass panel. He answered, and something in his posture shifted, the way a person shifts when they stop being a regular human being and become the person other people are waiting for. Shoulders back. Voice low and clear. Not asking, directing. He came back 3 minutes later. Everything okay? She asked. Foundation business. He pocketed the phone. I have a small family foundation. I keep trying to make it run without me. What does it fund? A pause. Things that mattered to my wife. He said it without affect. Julia didn't push. But something settled in the space between them, the kind of understanding that doesn't ask for elaboration. What Julia Torres didn't know, standing there with a glass of sparkling water, and a growing sense that the man beside her was not quite what this room had decided he was that Marcus Hayes' foundation managed $63 million in assets. That his assistant had been trying to reach him about a grant proposal approval. That the development director of Westbrook Academy kept a framed photo of the thank you letter Marcus had written at the time of the donation. Brief, plain, handwritten, because she'd never received one like it before. The night was far from over. At 8:20, Diana sent the administrative coordinator, Paul Chen, across the room to Marcus's table. Marcus saw him coming, watched him approach with the expression of a man carrying a task someone else had assigned him, and already regretted. Mr. Hayes, so sorry to interrupt. Could I have a word? They stepped to the edge of the room. Mrs. Harrington has flagged a concern about the registration, Paul said. He looked like he wanted to be somewhere else. She believes there may have been an error in, Paul. Marcus's voice was quiet. Unhurried, can you pull up the Q2 donor entries on your tablet? Paul blinked. I'm sorry? Your administrative tablet. The donor records. Q2. Paul looked at the device in his hand, opened it slowly, typed something. Read. His face went through a complete transformation. The specific transformation of a person who has just understood they've been standing in the wrong room this entire time. Mr. Hayes, I had no idea. Your name wasn't on anything. We were only told the benefactor had requested anonymity. I didn't know that was intentional, Marcus said. I'd like it to stay that way, if possible, of course. Yes, absolutely. I'll go explain to Mrs. Harrington that there's no issue. You don't need to explain anything to her, Marcus said. Just let me enjoy the evening. Paul nodded several times. Walked back. Marcus watched him reach Diana, watched Diana cycle through impatience, then confusion, then something harder to name, an expression he'd seen in boardrooms before, the look of someone whose model of the situation isn't matching the incoming data. She looked over Paul's shoulder toward table 4. Marcus was already looking away. He sat down, put his hand in his jacket pocket, found the painted rock. Sophie's handwriting on the note back home, for bravery. He held it and thought about leaving. Then he thought about the 12 scholarship families in this room. Kids at Westbrook because of a check he'd signed on an ordinary Thursday. And he stayed. He didn't know that Diana Harrington had made a decision of her own. That Paul's report wasn't going to be enough for her. That she had decided, in that particular way certain people do, that some problems needed to be handled in public. He found out 30 minutes later. She did it in front of 16 people. The dinner plates had been cleared. Claire Braddock, the event chair, was at the podium preparing her remarks. Diana had positioned herself near Marcus's table, voice pitched just above conversational, the content explicitly designed to carry. The gala is a fundraising event. Participation at a certain level is the expectation. We cannot simply have anyone walk in because they completed an application. It reflects on the school. It reflects on the committee. Some lines exist for a reason. Sandra, one of her committee members, kept glancing at Marcus with an expression that was almost an apology. Philip had discovered something very interesting in the middle distance. Marcus kept his hands flat on the table. Let her talk. She moved a step closer. Something in the room, some ambient social pressure, shifted slightly, the way it does when an audience realizes what kind of moment is about to arrive. "Why are you still here?" She said it clearly, loud enough to be a statement, not a question. "I've been patient this evening, and I think you understand the situation. Paul spoke with you. This is a donor dinner. The scholarship families have a separate event. It was held last Thursday. I'm sure you received the information. I don't want to be unkind, but for the sake of everyone present, the appropriate thing." Marcus Hayes turned in his chair. He didn't stand. He didn't raise his voice. He looked at Diana Harrington with the particular calm of a man who had sat in harder rooms than this. Hospital consultation rooms, attorney offices, a small church on a gray Tuesday in November 2 years ago, and simply hadn't broken in any of them. "Because I paid for this room," he said. The silence was immediate and total. Not the polite pause of interrupted small talk. The actual silence of something dropped, spreading outward from his table in a wave that reached every wall in the Performing Arts Center. Diana blinked. "I'm sorry? The Performing Arts Center." His voice stayed level. The lighting installation, the acoustic renovation, the science wing on the east side, the scholarship fund that brought 12 families here tonight. All of it. He stood slowly. "I funded it anonymously because I didn't want a dinner in my honor or my name over a door. I wanted my daughter to have a school that treated her like she was supposed to be there." He looked at Diana Harrington for one more moment. "I'm still here because this is my table. You're the one standing at it." Claire Braddock, at the podium, had stopped mid-sentence. The microphone was live. The room held 212 people. Every one of them had heard Marcus Hayes. Diana Harrington's champagne glass stopped halfway to her lips and stayed there. Greg Harrington, across the room, had gone the specific pail of a man calculating several things at once and not arriving at good answers for any of them. Sandra took a full step back. Philip appeared to be considering whether it was too late to become invisible. Paul Chen stood in the doorway, took in the scene, closed his eyes for 1 second, opened them, and moved toward the event chair with purpose. Julia Torres was completely still, looking at Marcus with the expression of someone whose reading of something has just been confirmed. Marcus sat back down, not triumphant, not relieved. The expression of a man who had said a true thing in plain terms and was waiting for the room to catch up with it. Claire Braddock cleared her throat gently into the microphone. She had organized 400 events. She had survived 3 board restructurings and a literal ceiling collapse in 2019. She adapted. "Thank you, everyone, If we could take our seats, Paul. Could you bring up the presentation? Paul approached the front, opened a laptop. The donor recognition display, a scroll of names projected every year during the formal remarks, appeared on the screen behind the podium. He navigated to Q2. A single line appeared in the center of the screen, large enough for 200 people to read clearly. Anonymous benefactor, $20,100,000. Performing Arts Center, Science Wing renovation, Rachel Hayes Memorial Scholarship. A murmur moved through the room like a current. Claire Braddock, choosing every word precisely. It's our honor this evening to acknowledge that the benefactor behind our scholarship fund and our facility expansion has joined us in person for the first time. Marcus Hayes, Sophie's dad. Table 4. 212 people turned to look at Table 4. Marcus raised one hand, flat, brief, and looked back down. The Ashworths at his table began to applaud. Then, the table behind them. Then the whole room, uneven, uncertain at first, and then genuine, the specific sound of people understanding something they'd almost missed. Diana Harrington did not applaud. Her glass had been placed on the nearest surface. Her face had finished its journey through a sequence of expressions that ended somewhere pale and still. Greg, across the room, met her eyes once, looked away. When Diana tried to cross back to the committee table 6 minutes later, Claire Braddock quietly intersected her path. Diana, after the remarks, "Find me," said like a question, not a question. Diana sat down at the nearest available seat, did not speak for the rest of the evening. 30 minutes after the final remarks, when the room had thinned and the night staff had begun folding linens, Marcus stood near the side exit with his jacket over one arm. Julia Torres found him there. "Why didn't you just tell her?" she asked. "Because it wouldn't have helped. She needed to not know who I was." He paused. That was the point. Julia was quiet for a moment. "Sophie doesn't know about any of it. No, and she doesn't need to. She thinks she's at Westbrook because the art program is excellent." "It is," Julia said. "I know." He picked up his jacket. Then stopped, looked at her. "She left me a painted rock this morning." "For bravery." Julia looked at him for a moment. "She was right, you'd need it." "I don't know about that." "You stayed," Julia said simply. "When leaving would have been so much easier." That's what the rock was for. He didn't have an answer for that. But he didn't look away. Outside, the night was quiet. The consequences, though, were only beginning. By Monday morning, 3 things would happen, none of which Diana Harrington, or Greg, or anyone who'd spent the evening deciding what kind of man Marcus Hayes was could have anticipated on the drive home. The board met Thursday. By Friday, Diana Harrington received a formal letter on Westbrook Academy letterhead. Her role as Parent Excellence Committee Chair had been dissolved, effective immediately. The committee was being restructured under the direct oversight of the Development Office. The stated reason? Conduct inconsistent with Westbrook's donor relations standards and institutional values. She called the school, reached an assistant, was told the decision was final. She called Sandra. Voicemail, she called Philip. He said, very carefully, that he didn't think he could be helpful in this situation, and wished her well, and ended the call before she could respond. Her invitation to the spring planning retreat didn't arrive. She waited 2 weeks before acknowledging it wasn't going to. Greg, meanwhile, received a notification he chose not to share with Diana. A foundation account his firm had declined to pursue 18 months ago, citing their existing client load, had finalized with a competitor. The account belonged to the Rachel Hayes Memorial Foundation. Assets under management, $63 million. The competitor had been in conversations for some time. He filed the notification in a folder. Closed it. Some arithmetic he'd learned in 48 years was better done quietly. Marcus heard about the board decision from Claire Braddock, who called Saturday morning to offer a personal apology on behalf of the school. "It should never have happened," Claire said. "I want you to know the board understands that." "The school is good," Marcus said. "Sophie's happy. That was the whole thing. Is there anything we can do? Anything at all? Keep Miss Torres's program fully funded and give the scholarship families front section at next year's gala." He said it without heat. Claire said she would see to both personally. He went to the woodshop after. Sophie came with him. Saturday mornings were workshop mornings, a standing arrangement that neither of them had made official because it didn't need to be official. She claimed her stool. Narrated commentary on his sanding technique for 45 minutes, while Biscuit, their recently adopted rescue dog, slept under the workbench with the dedicated commitment of a dog who had found his place. He didn't tell Sophie about Diana, about the gala, about any of it. She had her own story, a school she loved, a teacher who saw her clearly, a father who pressed his suit and wore her sunflower sticker and showed up. That was enough. That was, in fact, everything. 3 months later, Sophie's blues and greens painting won the regional student art competition. She described it, while making it, as what being safe feels like. Julia had submitted it without telling her, not wanting to add any pressure to something Sophie had made for the simple reason of making it. The award ceremony was in the Performing Arts Center. Same room, different night entirely. Sophie walked to the stage in her best dress, accepted the ribbon with an expression that was trying very hard to be cool and not quite managing it, and held it up to the sound of 300 people who were glad for her. Marcus sat front section, table 4. He watched his daughter stand in the room, whose existence had cost him something real and given something real back, and he found the math worked out. Julia was in the seat beside him. She'd been in that seat at various events over the past months: the fall concert, the winter showcase, a parent curriculum night she hadn't been required to attend, in a pattern Sophie had observed and filed with the quiet satisfaction of a person whose plan is working. "She's never going to let me live this down," Marcus said. The win, breakfast commentary, minimum 6 years. Minimum, Julia agreed. After the ceremony, Sophie ran straight to him, ribbon first, then a hug that suggested the ribbon was really just an excuse for the hug. "Did you see? I won, Daddy. I was there. I won. I know. I'm aware." She pressed a folded printout of the painting into his hand, a copy given to all winners. He folded it once, carefully, and slid it into his jacket pocket. Next to the painted rock, which was still there. It had been in that pocket since October. They drove home in the early evening, Sophie narrating a full play-by-play of the ceremony for Biscuit's benefit in the back seat, while Biscuit gazed out the window with professional detachment. Julia followed in her car. Dinner was at the house. Julia knew where the pasta lived in the cabinet, and Marcus knew she needed the music on while cooking. And neither of them had made a formal announcement about any of this, because Sophie had apparently already handled that on their behalf. Relaying to her grandmother 6 weeks prior, "Dad's best friend Julia comes for dinner a lot now. I think they're figuring it out. I'm helping." After dinner, dishes done, Sophie fell asleep on the couch with the award ribbon in one hand and Biscuit arranged across her legs. Marcus and Julia sat at the kitchen table with the last of the coffee, talking about nothing consequential. The window had fogged with warmth. Rain had started outside. the quiet kind. Inside, warm, steady, the particular kind of safe that gets built one careful day at a time, not announced, just accumulated. It had not been a perfect year. It would not always be easy. There were Tuesday mornings still when something in the house felt its own absence in a way that didn't ask permission. He knew how to live alongside that now. Not past it, through it, the way you move through weather, because you don't get to negotiate with weather. But Sophie's laugh was the same quality as her mother's. The woodshop smelled like something worth keeping. The painted rock was still in his pocket. The blues and greens painting was folded over his heart. Some things get built carefully, one true piece at a time. He was good at building things.